Today on Sugar Spun Run, I'll be showing you how to make a dense, soft, and irresistible bundt cake. Hey Sugar Spun Bakers, Sam here, and a lot of you have been asking me for a good bundt cake recipe, and today I am delivering. Now, technically a bundt cake is simply a cake that's been baked in a bundt pan, but today I'm going to be showing you how to make one my way, AKA the best way. The first thing you need to do, other than buying a bundt pan, is preheat your oven to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Next, you'll need 2 sticks or 1 cup of unsalted butter. Now you want this to be softened, but you don't want it to be so soft that it's melty. We're going to add these into a large mixing bowl. While a bundt pan might be the only official criteria for a bundt cake, in my house we have really strict standards. The bundt cake must be soft, it must be more dense than your average cake, and it must have a great buttery flavor and a crumb that almost melts in your mouth. Now to accomplish this, I use one of my favorite secret ingredients, which is cream cheese. You'll want to add 6 ounces of softened brick-style cream cheese in with your butter. Add 2½ cups of granulated sugar. This might seem like a lot. Keep in mind that this is going to make a pretty large bundt cake, and we're not covering it with a sugar-loaded buttercream frosting. We're just doing a simple glaze. So you want the cake to have just the right amount of sweetness on its own. Beat these together with an electric mixer until they're creamy, well combined, and the mixture is lightened in color. This is going to take about a minute or 2. I had somebody get mad at me the other day because I had my KitchenAid sitting in the background and I was using a hand mixer. You can definitely use your stand mixer. I just like to use my hand mixer on videos because then you get a better view of what the batter is supposed to look like, rather than having to peek down the side of my KitchenAid bowl. You always want to make sure that you take a second to pause and scrape the sides and bottom of the bowl and then mix again. That way all of your ingredients are well combined. This batter uses 6 large eggs. We're going to add them one at a time and mix well after each addition. I usually stir for about 10 seconds on medium speed and then add the next egg. I normally use brown eggs from my parents, but we ran out of those, so I've just been using store-bought recently. I hope to have my own chickens next year so this doesn't happen again. I always crack my eggs in a separate bowl just in case a little bit of shell gets in or the egg turns out to be bad. That way I don't get that mixed in with the rest of the batter. Don't forget to scrape your bowl. Oops! That is why we crack the eggs in a separate bowl. When you've finished adding all of your eggs, your batter should be really smooth and creamy. It should be this pale yellow color. As you can see, there are no lumps in here. It's almost a billowy consistency when you're using your electric mixer. So you wouldn't get that kind of view if I was using my KitchenAid mixer instead. Now for flavor, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of vanilla extract. Just give this a quick stir. This batter smells so good already, and it's not even in the oven yet. Now the next thing you're going to need is a bowl for your dry ingredients. We need 3 cups of all-purpose flour for this recipe. Whatever you do, do not substitute self-rising flour or your cake is going to overflow in your oven. Add 3/4 teaspoon of salt and 1½ teaspoons of baking powder. And you'll just use a whisk to stir the ingredients together until everything is nicely combined and there are no lumps from the flour. Now you need 1 more ingredient for this cake, and that is 1/3 cup of whole milk. We're going to alternate adding the flour mixture and the milk to our butter mixture. I'm going to use my electric mixer for this step and just keep the speed on low. So I like to add the flour in about 3 parts and the milk in about 2 parts. And I always start and end with the flour mixture. I know this doesn't seem very slow, but I promise this is the lowest setting on this mixer. This thing is a beast. Let's give this 1 more stir with our spatula just for assurance that everything is completely combined. And your batter should be, again, look nice and satiny and lump-free. Okay, so we're going to set that aside, and now we are going to do perhaps the most important step when making a bundt cake, and that is prepare our bundt pan. This step right here can make or break the whole cake. Now, I am going to show you how I grease and flour my pans. I like to use shortening. I'm using Crisco today. And I just take a plastic bag and like to grab a good bit of the shortening. Got a lot here, and I am going to grease this whole pan. You want to leave no crevice untouched, especially if you are using one of those fancier bundt pans that have all sorts of intricate designs in it. Now I'm using a lot to start, but once I'm finished, it should just be a thin layer of shortening in the cake pan. Make sure you get the center. Now, greasing the pan alone is not enough. We're also going to lightly flour it. I'm just going to sprinkle some flour around the Bundt pan, up the sides a little bit. And then we'll just tap this all around, add more flour as needed until the entire pan everywhere you've just greased is covered with a light coating of flour. I want a little bit more in the center. Now this is still a lot of flour. You want just a light coating of flour, so we're going to tap out as much of that excess flour as we can. Normally I do this over my sink so I don't make a mess, but you wouldn't have been able to see it there. Now pour that beautiful bundt cake batter into your prepared pan, and you'll want to use a spatula just to make sure it's spread evenly. I always get so nervous doing this on camera. Now we'll take this over to our 350° Fahrenheit preheated oven, where it's going to need to bake in the center of your oven for about 50 to 60 minutes. Usually I recommend using a toothpick to test if your cake is done, but that just is not going to cut it here with bundt cake because it's so deep. I recommend you use a wooden skewer, and you want to insert that into the center of the thickest part of the bundt cake. Once that skewer comes out clean or with a few moist crumbs, it's finished baking. Let your cake cool in the bundt pan for about half an hour, at least half an hour, before inverting it. Even though we meticulously greased and floured our pan, for a little extra insurance, before I invert the cake, I like to just gently loosen it from the center and the sides. A butter knife, just gently wiggling that in there. Shouldn't be necessary, but you can't be too safe. This will be harder if you have a really decorative pan. All right, the moment of truth. We're going to see how well I greased this. We're going to invert it. I was really nervous this wasn't going to look this beautiful, but we did a good job and it came out perfectly. I'm going to let this cool completely. It's still a little bit warm before I drizzle it with glaze. Once the cake is cooled, we'll make our glaze icing by combining 2 cups of powdered sugar with 2 tablespoons of melted butter. You know I want to make sure all of that butter gets in there. We'll add a ½ teaspoon of vanilla extract for flavor. We'll stir this together. It's going to be too thick. We're going to add some milk in a minute, but I like to start getting that butter worked in with the sugar. And now we will add our milk. Now you'll need about 1 to 2 tablespoons of whole milk. It's possible you might need a little bit more. I'm going to start with just 1 tablespoon, about 1 tablespoon, and then I'll add more as needed. Definitely going to need some more. Let's add that 2nd tablespoon. If you go too far and accidentally add too much milk, you can always add more powdered sugar to save it. All right, I'm going to stir this really well to work out any lumps that might be there from the sugar. You can avoid the lumps by sifting your sugar instead. Sometimes I'm patient enough for that, but usually only if I'm going to be photographing the cake. Otherwise, who cares if there are lumps in it? All right, now this is still slightly thicker than I want it to be. What I want is the icing to be dripping off the spoon a little bit more, so I'm going to add a splash more milk. If you wanted to make a traditional glaze, you could actually leave out the butter and use a little bit more milk, but I love the extra richness that the butter adds. It really complements the cake. Okay, so this is perfect. That ribbon that falls off the spoon when you lift your spoon out of the glaze should hold its shape for several seconds before dissolving back into the glaze. Now we can go ahead and decorate our bundt cake. Transfer that bundt cake over to a serving platter, or you can just leave it on your cooling rack and eat it off that like an animal, and then drizzle your glaze evenly over top. You could pour it over. I just like to use a spoon and gently nudge it over the top of the cake, or the bottom, I guess. Now, what you should do is give this glaze an hour to set so that it cuts nice and prettily. I am not that patient, so we're going to dig in now so I can show you how this cake looks. Buttery, dense, and soft. This is how you do vanilla bundt cake the sugar spun round way. I hope you guys love this recipe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.